Hey y'all, welcome and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do a little bit of all things creepy. Now, whether that be me reading scary stories that you guys have sent in to me, talking about scary videos I've seen online, talking about scary books, scary movies, whatever the case may be, it is a fun time here if I do say so myself, and if that sounds cool, I would love to have you. Now, please check out the description below to find out where to send in your scary stories and where to also find me elsewhere. I'm on all of their social medias, so please check that out. And without further ado, let's get right on into this. I know I have a little bit of a different background than I have had recently because I just fixed up a background that I thought was so cute, but my husband and I just filmed 2 podcast episodes literally in this spot, and I was like, well, if it's already set up, I might as well just film here. So now, I did not upload yesterday, so to make up for that, I did promise that today would be a long video because I am combining the stories that I picked for yesterday and today. So get cozy, grab a snack, grab a fun drink, because we are going to be here for a second. When I was around 4 years old, my mom and dad divorced. We had to move, so I moved with my mom, and we moved into a little village in the elder apartments where elders lived for the most. I was only a kid. A little bonus info is that before we moved, we never had problems with sleeping alone or anything. We lived there for around a year until we moved into another apartment at the same place, because it was bigger and I could finally get my own room because I'd been sleeping on the bed in my living room until that. When I got my room, I instantly had this bad feeling of a presence in that room. I wasn't alone in there and actually didn't want to sleep in there. My mom forced me to, and I would cry for hours, covering my ears, and be all in fear until I could get up and be allowed to leave my room. I was scared to be alone in that room, or alone in general, because I had this feeling of something or someone watching me. I think a month or two after we moved in, me and my mom were in the living room. My room was like right beside of the living room, and we were just chilling, watching TV and stuff. But then I hear some loud bangs come from my room. It kind of scared both of us, but my mom decided to go in and take a look, because it could be an animal or something. When she opened the door, it stopped. We could see the wardrobe door swinging, and we kind of brushed it off. From that day on, I was allowed to sleep in my mom's room every day until the point that I was 13. My mom told me after some years that she could hear our chairs get pulled across the floor. When she would go check, nothing would happen, and everything was as before. Anyways, as the years went on, I'm like 7 at this point, we moved around inside of the apartments because we got some new sofas and stuff. So try and visualize this. Our living room is like a square, and in the upper right corner, we place a table. Before it was empty, we decided to try something new. And from that day, everything was quiet, and I was no longer scared to be alone in my kitchen or in my room anymore. We decided to move it around again, and we removed this table, and suddenly she could hear the chairs and stuff move around again, without anything being moved around when we checked. From that point, I was again scared to be alone, and sometimes when sitting in my sofa watching TV, I could see the shadow of something from the corner of my eye. I was only like 10 at this point, I think. I just got used to it, and it wasn't anything we talked about anymore. It just was kind of there. Well, when I was 11 or 12, I don't quite remember, we moved the living room around again, and we placed a table there again without knowing or recognizing that it would calm whatever was going on. And then it turned all quiet again. Then we finally saw that it was the corner. Not that long after we had just removed the table because my mom just wanted a lamp there, but it wasn't enough because everything went again. We placed a table there again when I was around 13, and it calmed the place. We've since then always had something big in that corner, like a sofa or a table or something, because we won't try to wake that beast again. We've never had a priest or somebody to find out what is in our home, because now it's quiet and it wasn't bad, it was just kind of harassing us. It wasn't to the point where it would touch or do us harm. I've been sleeping in my room since 13, and I've been able to feel safe here. I don't know what it is or what it wants, but I'm not trying to challenge it, even though I feel like sometimes its presence is here. I know I'm not alone, and I had a period not long ago where I was scared to go into our living room after dark. I would run through it because I was scared of something. That's terrifying. Okay, I've never heard of a story like that where, like, activity calmed down if a piece of furniture specifically got put there. I'm assuming that, like, one of the past residences that lived there, maybe they passed away in that space, had something there, and it just calms them down to have it sort of similar, is literally the only thing I can think of. Like, it doesn't feel malicious, it just feels invasive to me. I don't know. That's weird. Alright, next story. Hi Morgan, my name is Lucy, and yes, you can say my name, but I'll be making up fake names for my family members. Now, I would like to start my story with my father's paranormal stories. I'm going to go over this with the most terrifying experiences first because it's very short. When he was away for a while on his mission, he once tempted Satan and said that he was better than Satan and that he could beat Satan in a fight. That night he lay ready to fall asleep and he starts not being able to move. He then has some terrifying demon creature crawl on his head and start shaking him back and forth. He starts praying because we're very religious, and it eventually goes away, but for him it's terrifying. When he was a teen, he grew up in a really haunted house. It was already haunted before, but then someone, let's call him Tim, played a Ouija board in the house. So weird things would happen, like the TV would switch on, or things would get moved, or you'd hear weird sounds. But the most terrifying thing that cannot compare to any of the things is he was watching TV, and he started hearing the noise of someone strumming a guitar. He yells at his brother, who's the only one home, let's call him Jeremy. He says, "Jeremy, stop playing with the guitar." His brother Jeremy then yells out from the bathroom, "I am in the bathroom, and I'm not strumming your guitar." And then he gets really creeped out. He runs to the room where his guitar is being strummed, and he sees his guitar strumming on its own. Terrifying, I know. The craziest thing that's ever happened to him was when 2 of my cousins had it happen to them too. When my dad was super young, he would have this man, who he called Rooster, who was a middle-aged man with a broom stash and a construction outfit, lure him to his closet during the night and say, "Do you want to see a trick?" He would either stick out his tongue in a cartoon way or his eyes in a cartoon way. One time he fell asleep on the couch and his mom brought him to bed. She was walking away. Rooster popped up on his bed, started yelling at him and screaming for him to never bring his mom inside of that room ever again. That terrified him, but he eventually fell asleep. One day my dad was talking to my older cousin, let's call her Christy, about paranormal stories and they've experienced. Well, then she starts talking about how when she was younger, about 2 times she was staying at Nana's house, she had this man lure her to the closet and say, "Hey, do you want to see a trick?" and poke out his tongue or his eyes in a cartoon way. He starts acting all surprised, and he asked her to describe him, and she described him piece by piece. He never told her about this, nor did she ever know. So the fact was, they had the exact same dream, and it's terrifying. They were talking about this at another family gathering, and my other cousin, let's call her Ellie, said, "Wait, I've had this dream." So all 3 of them had that exact same terrifying dream of this man named Rooster. We think it's a spirit that follows the family, but enough of my dad's stories, let's talk about mine. This is the most recent because my brother decided to play a Ouija board, and I think something followed him home and got attached to our house. He played it in the school bathroom, but as you know, ghosts can always follow. But my first encounter was when I was sitting in my bedroom on a video call. I had online school. I was trying to answer a question, but for some reason my mic wasn't working. So I typed in the chat, "Sorry, let me just fix my computer." I sent that in, and then all of a sudden I heard from my hallway this loud stomping, like boots were walking towards my bedroom. I can send you a video of what it would look like, but it's so creepy. I froze, started feeling a sensation of fear come over me, and I started to cry because I was overwhelmed. I didn't have my phone to call my mom at the moment because my sister decided to take it to school, so thanks a lot to my sister. So I had to gather my courage and walk outside the hall where I heard the footsteps to go to her home phone. The whole time I couldn't stop crying. I grabbed the phone, called my mom, and she thankfully picked up. Sometimes she can't pick up because her hands might be dirty. She works with elderly people, and she told me to pray and sing some of the church songs and go get our dogs and bring them inside. We have 3 dogs and 1 cat, and all of them are medium-sized dogs, so not scary at all. I don't really know what they would do to protect me anyways. I brought my 2 dogs in, which are both boys, and they happily went in and went to sleep. They were tired of playing, but my girl dog, who is much more aware of her surroundings, wouldn't go in and started whimpering. It terrified me. She eventually went in when I started praying some more, which is good because I really wanted her to come inside. But nothing really happened, and it was like that for a while. But one day I hear a cut ball in the kitchen. I thought nothing of it, but I really should have. But I was in another class call. I heard my TV switch on and music starts playing from it. Our TV's not like a TV with different channels, but it does have Disney+, Netflix, and Hulu. At that moment, it was switched on to the music channel, and it was playing a song about going home or something like that. It really scared me, but I didn't know what to do, so I just went to the living room and turned it off. The last straw happened when I was trying to draw some art for my art class and a door slammed on its own. I got terrified and started yelling at the top of my lungs and playing scriptures on my phone and using my computer to play church songs, saying, "You do not belong in this house, only good spirits are here." And nothing's happened since. I chanted it for a good 30 minutes, and when I felt safe and not scared, I stopped. So, yes, no matter what you believe, doing something that you wholeheartedly believe in will always help those situations. That's terrifying. That was a lot of scary stories. Oh my goodness. Alright, next story. My whole life, I've felt like a paranormal magnet. Ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot. I've had some sort of experience with most of the weirdness out there. I live in a small town in northern Utah. It's a town of maybe 2,000 people. My Bigfoot experience was around 10 miles from my house back in 2005. I went out deer hunting with my now ex-boyfriend. We were in the 1983 Toyota truck, and we had his dog when we were sleeping out in the bed of the truck at night. We'd been out driving for around 3 days, and we found a really cool camp spot to settle into for the night. We pulled in with around 3 hours of daylight left. We parked, got our cooking gear out to start making dinner, and decided to walk down to the dirt road a little ways. We walked around 150 yards when we found a stock pond. Wanting to get dinner started, we turned around and walked back to camp. When we got back, we started a fire and got to cooking. We ate and then we sat around and talked. His dog, having been around large game, moose, deer, and bear, started behaving strangely. She was sprinting from one side of the fire to the other, just at the edge of the light and darkness. She was whimpering and crying, which was very out of ordinary for her. So I opened the back of the truck and climbed inside. After around 2 minutes, she came running from out of the darkness and leapt across the fire and into the back of the truck. She cuddled up to me behind my back, and I could feel her shaking. She was terrified. After around 20 minutes of begging, I finally convinced my boyfriend to put the fire out and come to bed. Reluctantly, he did. We locked up the truck shell and lay down to sleep. My boyfriend fell instantly asleep, but myself and the dog were uncomfortable. We'd been lying there for around 15 minutes, and she was laying on my feet, and I felt her sit up. She was looking out the window at the dirt road. She was very lowly growling. At first I told her to lay back down, and she did. And then she got up again a few minutes later, growling. That's when I sat up to see what this was about. In the light of an almost full moon, I could see a very large animal standing on the dirt road that was 50 feet from us. It wasn't moving, just standing there and staring. I grabbed the dog and pulled her up by the head so she would stop growling. I quietly but frantically tried to wake up my boyfriend, but no, he was passed out. After what seemed like an eternity, but was only actually about a minute, this thing walked upright down the dirt road towards the stock pond we had found earlier that evening. It was massive. I'd guess 9 feet tall and probably 1,000 pounds. It had dark hair from what I could tell because it was night. Not having any other choice but to try and sleep, I watched it walk out of sight and then I laid back down to try and sleep. I didn't actually go to sleep. In the morning, I looked for tracks, but the dirt on the road was so compacted I didn't see anything. We packed up and left that area, never even got a deer. I've been back a couple of times over the years, but nothing else has happened in that area. I used to work in an old saloon, Shooting Star Saloon, and I loved it, but some eerie things happened there. Mostly before and after closing, but occasionally when we were open for business, I'd hear boots stomping on the wood floor. I've had the fridge in the kitchen slam shut, and I've had the kitchen doors slam. I've had my hair played with while standing in the kitchen, and I've had my butt touched. I've seen something dark standing at the back of the bar, and I've seen a man in the basement. There's been several employees shut into the walk-in fridge as well, and lights turn out. Bathroom doors will slam shut, smell of smoke, squeak of front doors opening when no one's there. Lots of weirdness. But nothing to scare me from ever going back. It's a great place with great food and atmosphere, and the owner's amazing. That being said, I live around the corner from that saloon. My home was built in 1923, and I've seen and heard some weird things in my own house. But we're used to them, and actually I'd rather live here with our ghosts than to move to a new place and wonder what ghost will haunt the new house. Occasionally, myself and the kids will hear what sounds like the cardboard boxes being moved around across cement in the basement. I've had things go missing and show up days later somewhere else. I've seen things out of the corner of my eye. I've had our smoke detectors go off for no reason in the wee hours of the morning. My husband thinks I'm nuts, but I just don't think he's in tune as I am. There's been times where I've seen shadows wandering the streets of my town after dark. My husband's grandparents' home, which has been sold and renovated, is down the street from our home. The current owners live in another state, and we just come in a few times a year to enjoy our state. Well, for extra cash, I clean that house a couple times a year. The house has some high strangeness as well. I've had this feeling of being watched, seeing shadows, smelling perfume, and there's a bedroom upstairs that I refuse to go into alone. I don't know exactly why, but it just gives me goosebumps. Back in 2008, I lived in Arizona on the Sunrise Ski Resort. It's on the Apache Indian Reservation. Beautiful area and amazing people, but the house I lived in was very creepy. We would hear full-on conversations in the living room after we went to bed. Phantom knocks on the front door. My daughter, who was 1 year old at the time, would scream and cry at the closet and refuse to sleep in her bedroom. We would set our cell phones in a specific windowsill to get service because the service area sucked, and they would be moved to the top of the fridge every single time. That place was weird. A friend's house not far from our house is haunted by a dark energy. It threw dry dog food at me and my sister-in-law while we were sitting at the dining room table and no one else was there. I've got stories for days, but there's just a few. I don't know why paranormal things seem to follow me, but they always have. Okay, the Bigfoot story. I'm sorry. I am a person that has never really been into Bigfoot stories. I don't know if I believe in Bigfoot or not. I'm conflicted. I've never heard of a scary Bigfoot story. That one had me shook. That was the best thing ever. Oh my god. I always forget that Bigfoot is seen, like, everywhere and not just in Appalachia. Alright, next story. So this person sent in a few different stories and they labeled each one. So let's start off with the first one, which is titled The Hatman. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, I was sleeping with my mom a lot because I was scared of my room and some things in my room. When we went to bed one night, I had woke up in the middle of the night, and at the foot of the bed I saw the infamous Hatman. I didn't know who he was at the time, but I just laid there looking at him. He didn't seem to be looking at me, but my head was tilted to the side to where I could see him there, and the door to my mom's bathroom. He stood there for a second, then slowly walked towards my mom's bathroom door. I never thought it was sleep paralysis because I haven't had any sleep paralysis since after the second time I had the same experience happen again. Looking back at it now, though, I knew if I was able to move, I would have sat up immediately and tried to wake up my mom. I didn't really feel scared, though, but I wasn't at ease, like something was off. Second story, messages from the lost loved one. When I was 5 years old, my father had unfortunately passed away from pancreatic liver cancer. It was a sad loss, and it changed both me and my mom, especially when I got older and understood. He passed away in our living room on one of the hospital beds for home. It wasn't until last year my mom had started feeling him more. Not just in her heart, but physically too. The first thing she told me that happened was when she thought she heard me knocking at her door in the middle of the night. When she came to the door, no one was there. She thought I was just messing around, but when she came into my room, I was asleep. She also told me that she's felt someone in bed beside of her and someone touching her shoulder and back. She hasn't told me any of this recently, but sometimes she does tell me when we meet in the kitchen in the middle of the night that she wasn't having a good dream when I ask her if she's okay. She sheltered me from more of the negative things that goes on because she isn't the kind of person to share their emotions often. That was sad. Okay, next story. Your videos made me realize that I may be dealing with a mimic. Eesh. So I came across your videos around 4 months ago, and I've heard the stories of the mimic who copies your husband. This has been happening for as long as I can remember, like my whole life. Very often I spend time in my room on the second floor of the house, and my mom spends time in the living room. Well, many times my mom would call for me from downstairs, and when I responded, she would ask me why I was calling her. She's often said that she heard me call Mom from upstairs or something of the sort, but I never called for her. I brushed it off as her having bad hearing, as she does have slightly bad hearing. Maybe the house creaked or she heard someone yell something from outside and assumed the noise was me or something like that. Well, a situation that I simply cannot ignore happened 3 weeks ago. I just walked out of my bedroom, down the hall past my mom's room where she was putting laundry away, and went down the staircase and into the kitchen to make food. Around 30 seconds later, my mom comes downstairs and says to me, "Who are you saying hello to?" I instantly felt like something was off, and I got the creepiest feeling ever in that moment. I looked at her and said, "I never said anything." She said that she heard me say hello around the bottom of the staircase, and I assumed I was saying hi to my cat, but the cat was sleeping in the living room. She brushed it off, but I could not stop thinking about it. It's very common for me to say hi to the cat, and as someone with severe ADHD, it's very common for me to do something and then immediately forget. But I just know in my gut that I never said hello. The cat wasn't even around to say hello to in the first place. My mom went away on her cruise 3 days later, and I cleansed the house. I made it very clear that if there was something malicious in that house, it is very much not welcome. Thankfully, nothing happened since then. If there was a mimic, I think and hope that it's gone. I have 2 different types of stories, but one of them was from last night, and I don't know whether it was a mimic, but I would like to know just in case. Another mimic story. Back to back. I've lived with my boyfriend for around a year now, and we have the window open almost every night. I live in the UK, and this has been the first time I've experienced this. I was awake till 2 or 3 in the morning, and I have insomnia and struggle to sleep. Earlier in the day, I started watching your YouTube and TikTok, but as I sat watching people gaming on YouTube, I hear a weird sound. I've heard foxes and their mating calls before, but as I'm listening, it's getting farther and farther. So without looking out the window, I shut it and tried to ignore it. I tried to ignore any sound that was weird. It could just be nothing. I just thought it was a little creepy and thought it was a little ironic, just so it's easier to understand. Behind my house are trees and a large grass patch. The second stories are paranormal. I'm 25, but at the time of the story, I was younger. There was always this feeling of something being in my mom's house, and I've seen a few things there. 2 children who play on the stairs, and occasionally you can see them poking their heads over the banister. There's a dark figure that you can see dart past the living room door, and then a light one just after. I've never seen this by looking at the door just out of the corner of my eye. When me and my boyfriend at the time were staying at my mom's house at this point, I was used to things happening. My boyfriend got up to go to the toilet and opened the living room door and froze. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "I think your sister or brother's awake." I asked why, and he said, "Well, there's something flashing in the kitchen." So I got up to the kitchen and flipped the light on, and there was no kids. They were still asleep. I know I said 2 stories, but I do have another one, and I find this one funny. This happened when I was around 19 or 20, I could be wrong, but I stood there in the kitchen talking to my mom, and out of nowhere, a spaghetti strainer flew off the rack. I caught it before it hit me in the head, but my mom said, "Well, I don't think George the ghost likes you," but as soon as I said hi to him, I've never experienced anything being thrown at me again. That's so funny. My God. Alright, next story. For some background, from the age of 6 to 24, I had a demonic attachment. It ruined my mental and physical health for years, but now I'm 27 and doing much better. Not long after I got rid of this attachment, I met the man I call my brother. We met by chance, but were definitely soul bonded in a way that I've never experienced or even ever heard of. In April of 22, my brother and his ex rented a house together. We're both sensitive to the paranormal, but his ex wasn't. She would frequently denounce anything we experienced until she experienced it. My fiancé is not sensitive either, but they aren't exactly skeptical anymore because I've talked to them about my experiences. In May of 22, I also moved into this house with my brother and his ex. We experienced things outside of the house, but the inside, while it had an off energy, didn't seem to have anything happening. For a few weeks, we lived in solitude. We ate dinner together, played board games and video games, went on drives together. It was fantastic. But then the energy in the house shifted. I'd gotten a new job, which was 35 to 45 minutes away from the house, and one morning I woke up to get ready and told my brother I was heading out and went on my way. He decided to get in the shower and had only been in the shower for 5 or so minutes before he heard me call his name. Now, we have a very specific nickname for each other, and we say it with a certain cadence. My brother knew I had left, and if I had come back, he would have been able to hear the front door open. So knowing better than to answer, he checked our Life 360 and saw that I was very clearly not at home. He texted me to let me know what happened, but there wasn't much to do from there. At this point, I was a week or two recovered from having surgery. One day I was home alone. I was sitting in the living room watching something on TV when I heard my brother call out my nickname from the landing. I knew he wasn't there because he had left around 15 minutes prior to go out with some of his friends. I texted him and he came home around 5 minutes later. We started discussing the things we had been experiencing in this house. The mimic was a good one too. The only thing it got wrong was at the end of the cadence we used when saying the nickname. And to anyone else they wouldn't be able to tell. We told both of our parents to never answer it unless they were sure it was us and we were home, and that we would be calling for them. One day the activity seemed to stop. No mimic, no bumps and thumps in the night, no waking up and seeing the red glowing eyes outside of our second floor windows, no tapping on my AC and the window at 2 and 3 in the morning. The house was quiet. Now obviously this was not very calming. The dead quiet of the house seemed even worse than the noises. After 2 weeks or so, I went downstairs to get a glass of water in the middle of the night. Our sink was directly in front of a window, which we never looked out of at night. I dropped a fork into the sink, so as I bent over to grab it, I heard a deep breath behind me. I immediately knew in my soul that something was waking up. I woke up my brother and told him that. That wasn't a normal breath. It was preparing for something. The activity in my brother's soul-bonded haunting did indeed get worse. I moved out not long after this encounter. Since then, while we both still had heavily experienced things, neither of us have heard the mimic since that house. My brother moved to Ohio, and I still live in Maryland. We're both technically still in Appalachia, but we know the rules, and we follow them instinctively without being told that the rules exist, almost like the land itself told us the rules. For a brief while, I lived in South Dakota, and we had a bunch of experiences out there if you'd like to hear about them. Please. That is terrifying. I'm glad it left you guys alone. They don't always do that, so you got really lucky with that one. Alright, next story. My story isn't really just my story. The story is all my late brother's. I don't know if I'd call it spooky or scary, but it's a story to tell nevertheless. You can call me B and my brother D. Apologies ahead of time, as I'm not a great artist and I've always wondered how to properly relay this story. My brother and I are 4 years apart. He's younger than myself. We have separate fathers, but he's just my brother. I never called him a half-sibling. All through D's childhood, he was a bit of an anxious kiddo. Paranoid, always seemed a bit worried, well, over-worried that something was going to happen. Same, who doesn't from time to time. But my brother, much more so. I should also mention that Dee's paternal side of the family deals a lot with mental illnesses like paranoia, bipolar, etc., stuff along the lines of that. We always sort of wrote this off as worries as a family-related trait. From a young age, anxiety aside, he was a go-getter. He really looked for fun and thrill, sometimes at the expense of minor injuries or repercussions here and there. This continued into his teenagehood. Words don't do justice his outgoing and fearless personality. He truly did live every day to be his last. He'd also give you the shirt off his back. He wasn't a perfect person, and his fun and thrill-loving personality occasionally did get him into a good amount of trouble. But anyways, by 18 or 19, I made him move in with my husband and I. He'd gotten into a bit of trouble with a few of his buddies, and it was his big sister's time to try and keep an eye on him. He was always respectful to me and my home. At this time, I didn't pay much mind to what he was saying. I wrote it off as anxiety of him and of it getting to his head. Maybe his dad said something to him that got to him a bit. Who knows? But by fall or winter of 2019, he had gotten out of a short jail stint. Petty stuff. No one was hurt. He was staying with me now, and I'd catch him saying here and there how he was going to pass away. I know, jarring. I'd be like, what? Why? And he'd just shrug it off, not really offering much of a true answer. I can say 100% that he was never suicidal. I'd say that now, but he would just say off things like, I'm gonna pass young, or I feel like I'll crash one day and that'll suck, or who cares, I'm going to this party because I'll pass one day. He said stuff like that often and just left it. It was just weird, almost casual talk from him. He had a twisted sense of humor, and he sort of just thought, oh yeah, that's just D making crazy talk again. Apart from anxiety, he was never diagnosed with anything. But by the end of 2019, it got more specific. I 100% remember him saying that he wouldn't make it to 20 years old. That turned into, I won't even make it to March of 2020, so it's whatever. Again, he just had this way of talking that was goofy, a demented sort of humor that ended up always being harmless. I would prod a little here and there, but again, he was not good at elaborating. I don't think he even knew why he said those things. But come January of 2020, 6:30 p.m., I stop at a gas station in town on my way in for overnight. My brother was sitting in the parking lot in his Jeep. I approach him and ask him why he wasn't home. He seemed really upset, tearful. He said he was worried and scared that he didn't know what to do. I didn't either. He seemed so upset. But I assured him that if he went home, there would be wings for him in the fridge if I prepped for him, and I was sure my husband could keep him company. I remember Dee shrugging. I'll never forget how defeated he looked. Anyway, we saw each other off with the usual love ya, and I promised him I'd see him tomorrow. I never did. He wasn't home when I got off in that morning, and my husband said that Dee had decided to stay with a friend. Okay, sure, he's an adult. It wasn't until later that evening that I got the call that Dee had died in a head-on crash. He died instantly, but Dee was right. He didn't make it to March. January 2020, he died at 19. I understand why people may wonder if it was suicide, but I assure you for many reasons it wasn't. Maybe it's little things clicking into place after the fact. Maybe it's the words and reasonings of a mourning sibling. But I truly think Dee just knew, no BS, that he was going to die young. Like, he wasn't just saying it to get a rise out of his friends or just to vocalize his anxiety. I think a part of him really did know. The way he lived, who he was. Maybe he didn't know right when, but I think he just had this feeling creeping up on him that he couldn't make out. I found out this info days after the accident. The day of the crash, he emptied his bank account into a charity for a girl with cancer in her town. He also made sure to visit the little brothers we had in common and spent time with them. He visited our grandparents, too. He also stopped by our aunts and started the process of enrolling into classes to get his GED, and he apologized to someone he had really wronged and then made an understanding with one another. It seemed like he was really trying. By the end of that night, he was gone. Remember when I said Dee's side of the family had their issues? People in the family had feelings like that and felt things were going to happen before they did. Personal experience, personal tragedy. Many came true. I'd probably go crazy too in that case. I was thinking Dee was one of them, only he didn't have the words to sort it out. Anyways, call me crazy, call me grieving. Maybe I just need to get these stories off my chest. I haven't shared with anyone because maybe I don't have the words either. But I think my brother knew that he didn't have long left, and he was right. Thank you, Morg. I'm sorry for the downer. I've made peace with all of this. I absolutely have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. Good luck out there in this crazy world. That was rough. I mean, I don't really have anything to add. I think they just wanted that story shared. I don't think they wanted any advice or any opinions, but it was rough. Alright, next story. I decided to share some of my stories and maybe get some advice. During quarantine, I had to live with my grandpa who lived in a heavily deserted area next to an abandoned house and next to a big open field. My first story happened when my two friends were invited over for a sleepover. I was walking down a hallway towards a room I called the back room, since it's in the back of the house. This hallway and that room had always given me ghostly feelings. Anyway, I was walking down the hall, and I saw my friends run past an open doorway into another room, so I ran over to cut her off to mess with her, but she wasn't there. So I went to go back to the room where I found her. From where I saw her before, she couldn't have been able to get to that room and to the back room. This next story is the most freaky to me. I was home alone walking down the same hallway to that same room, and it was dark. I went to open the door to the back room, and as I did, I saw a massive shadow figure taller than the door frame. I paused, and the figure balled up its fist and attempted to punch me in the face. I panicked and reached forward to flip on the light, which made it disappear. Ever since then, I've had this eerie feeling in that house, and I've always seen stuff out of the corner of my eye. Even now, as I'm writing this, I have to cut it a bit short, since I'm getting a splitting headache, and it feels like someone is pressing the bridge of my nose into my skull. Oh, okay. Alright, let's read one more story. I have a lot of ghost stories, but I've been thinking about this one specifically from when I was a child. I live in Oregon, surrounded by woods and mountains, and I used to live in this house that I sincerely believe was haunted. When I was a child, I was very into the paranormal. I always watched Ghost Adventures, did the Charlie challenge and all that, but nothing was ever noteworthy. I'd hear things from time to time, but nothing ever bad, but for some reason, that all changed. I'd always been pretty sensitive to the paranormal. I see ghosts and things that aren't there. I used to be able to speak to them and hear them when no one else could hear when I was a kid. I remember always having the feelings that I was being watched, and I would see things out of the corner of my eye or in the dark corners when the lights were off. It always felt wrong. Something was wrong. It was almost like whatever I was seeing or feeling was hiding so that I wouldn't see it. I remember one night I woke up and there was something in the corner of my room by the foot of my bed. I didn't have sleep paralysis, so I could still move. But there was this dark shadow, a man, standing in the corner of my room watching. I was so scared I had to sleep in my siblings' room. Things would only get worse from there. I would get scratches on me. I remember there being 3 long scratches on my stomach that were so deep I was bleeding. My mom thought it could have been our dog, who was a chihuahua, but she was sleeping in my mom's room. I laid down to take a nap one day. My door was closed and it was light out. I suddenly felt something hit me on the back. When I looked, it was a knee pad that I had lost a while before this happened. I looked and there was nothing there. But again, I felt like something was watching me. I ran to my sister's room and asked if she had thrown it at me, and she said no, that she was in her room drawing. I was so freaked out. Now, as stupid as it sounds, we had this little Keebler elf stuffed doll. No one knew where it came from. My parents hadn't owned it previously. There was this really sinister feeling whenever I was around it. There was always this pit in my stomach whenever I saw it, and I would feel an immense amount of fear, which was very unusual for me. I was not a kid who was scared of anything. Things kept happening, and one day my aunt, we'll call her B for privacy reasons, had came over and she asked me, "Have you been experiencing scary stuff?" I was surprised because I felt like no one believed me. She told me she felt a bad energy coming out of that very doll, and when we went to walk to my bus stop, she threw the doll out, and nothing ever happened to me after that. This is just my experience. My sister T would often see a little girl in her room. She thought it was me because we had similar features, but the little girl would walk out of her room whenever my sister would try to talk to her. My sister also said she felt something crawl into bed with her in the middle of the night, which she thought initially it was me, but realized that it was too big for me. We would also both hear people calling our names, even when no one was home. Well, that's a lot. Oh my god. But anyways, I guess that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow.